My wife called me while I was at the office. I've just inherited millions. Pack your stuff and leave my house. By the time I reached home, the divorce papers were already there waiting for me. I smiled, signed them, and simply said, "Best of luck." She had no clue what her uncle had truly left in that will, or what I had been keeping from her the whole time. My wife called me while I was at the office. Her voice was colder than I had ever heard it. "I've just inherited millions," she said flatly. "Pack your stuff and leave my house." Not our house, my house. The words didn't land like a surprise. They landed like confirmation. Around me, keyboards clicked and phones rang, but her sentence cut through everything. I stared at the spreadsheet on my screen, the numbers suddenly meaningless. Outside my glass office wall, my co-workers moved normally, unaware that my marriage had just ended in a single sentence. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply said, "Okay." When I reached home that evening, the divorce papers were already waiting on the dining table, neatly arranged, prepared in advance. She stood by the window, arms folded, her expression calm, confident, victorious. I picked up the papers, flipping through pages she had clearly reviewed long before she made that call. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. And as I signed my name without hesitation, I noticed something she didn't. She wasn't relieved. She was impatient. She thought she had already won. But the truth was, the real inheritance hadn't even begun to reveal itself. I had always been quiet. The kind of man people overlooked in meetings, in social gatherings, even in my own home. My intelligence wasn't flashy, but precise, calculated. I learned early that patience was a weapon, and silence a shield. My wife. She loved the show of things. Lavish gifts, public admiration, the thrill of attention. Me, I was the backdrop, steady, reliable, invisible. We had met in college, her charm blinding, her ambitions endless. I loved her quietly, deeply, thinking that devotion alone could anchor a storm. But storms aren't anchored. They move, unrelenting. I had tolerated her arrogance, her dismissive glances at dinner parties, her laughter that sometimes excluded me. Friends often told me, "She doesn't appreciate you." I smiled politely. Inside, I was already counting, observing, learning. Even my career mirrored this pattern. I built successes behind the scenes while others took the credit. Every promotion, every deal, every strategic move, they thought it was luck, timing, charisma. I knew better. I had learned early that being underestimated was not a weakness, it was an advantage. Now, as she believed herself victorious, I realized how quietly satisfying it would be to reveal just how invisible I had truly been. She didn't even look me in the eyes when I walked in. Just a cool tilt of her chin, like I was an inconvenient shadow in her suddenly bright life. The divorce papers sat between us, pristine and deliberate. I noticed the faint crease where she had folded them, the careful alignment. It was almost artful, if not for the cruelty behind it. "Thought you might want to pack tonight," she said, voice smooth, like reciting a line she'd practiced in front of the mirror. Her lips curved just enough to suggest amusement, not affection. I nodded, as if acknowledging the weather. Every detail of the house had been rearranged. Subtly in her absence, my favorite chair shifted, my books stacked with spines facing the wall, reminders that even my comfort was now optional. I caught her glance at the new chandelier she'd installed last week, a trophy in glass and crystal, as if it symbolized how far she had outgrown me. I could feel the air tighten with unspoken judgment. Her laughter on the phone earlier, crisp and dismissive, replayed in my mind. She thought every slight, every belittlement was invisible to me, but I had been cataloguing them all. Every pause, every smirk, every casual word meant to wound. It was all stored, and it would all matter later. I stood in the kitchen, the divorce papers half signed in my hand, and for the first time, I let the anger settle fully. Not the fiery, reckless kind, but a cold, deliberate clarity. Every small insult, every glance that dismissed me, every casual betrayal she'd thrown like a pebble into my life, they added up. Enough was enough. I looked around the house she thought she had claimed. The expensive furnishings, the new chandelier, even the polished floors, they were meaningless without control, without knowing the full story. And that was when it hit me. I had always been underestimated. Every time she assumed I was blind, naive, or weak, I had been building quietly, deliberately. My patience wasn't submission, it was preparation. The realization didn't come with a shout or dramatic confrontation. It came in a still moment, as I placed the pen back on the table. Signing the papers didn't mean surrender. It meant positioning. Let her believe she had won. Let her celebrate, flaunt, and plan her life without me. Because I knew something she didn't. I had assets she had never touched, decisions she had never considered, and a patience that would let the truth unfold on its own. Quietly, inexorably, perfectly. This was no revenge yet. This was the calm before it. I spent the next days in silence, moving through the motions as if nothing had changed. At work, I reviewed the documents she had never bothered to read, the financial statements, the joint accounts, the legal clauses buried in the will she thought she understood. My law degree had never been flashy, but it gave me a quiet advantage. I could navigate contracts, trusts, and inheritance clauses with precision. I drafted letters, consulted quietly with advisors, and traced every asset tied to her sudden windfall. Every step was methodical. No confrontation, no dramatics. She believed her millions were hers instantly, but I had anticipated every loophole, every contingent clause, every minor oversight she had never considered. At home, I maintained my calm facade, organizing my personal belongings as if preparing to leave permanently. Yet, each movement was calculated, positioning myself to reveal the truth at exactly the right moment. I took screenshots, compiled records, and confirmed contingencies that would turn her assumptions upside down. Revenge would not be loud. It would not be messy. It would be invisible, precise, and undeniable. Let her flaunt her victory. By the time she realized the real inheritance, it would be too late to stop what had already been set in motion. Patience, not passion, was my weapon. The day she decided to celebrate her victory, I stayed home, sipping coffee as sunlight cut across the polished floors. She strutted through the front door, eyes gleaming with triumph, expecting admiration, expecting submission. Instead, she found a letter resting neatly on the dining table, addressed in my precise handwriting. She read quickly at first, then slower, her smile fading with each sentence. The will's contingencies she had ignored, the trust she had assumed were hers outright. The hidden clauses, all spelled her loss in clear legal terms. My assets, my savings, even the property she had thought belonged to her, were untouched, protected, and aligned exactly as I had planned. Her voice caught once, then again, but I said nothing. I simply watched, detached, as the reality sank in. Every glance she threw carried disbelief, anger, and finally, silent resignation. I didn't gloat, I didn't shout. I let the weight of her own assumptions crush her quietly, elegantly. The house she had claimed with arrogance now felt hollow. She had celebrated prematurely, and I had stayed invisible, calm, unshaken, the architect of her quiet unraveling. When she finally looked at me, her eyes met mine with a mix of shock and understanding. I smiled slightly. That was enough. Word of what had happened spread quietly at first, then faster than either of us expected. Friends who had once admired her sudden wealth now whispered behind her back, questioning how she had miscalculated so badly. Family members, previously eager to align themselves with her fortune, began avoiding her calls, uncertain which side of the inheritance was truly theirs to trust. At work, colleagues who had noticed her confidence and superiority now glanced at her with subtle curiosity and barely concealed judgment. I remained unchanged, calm, my reputation intact, or perhaps enhanced. People began to see me differently, not as the quiet, overlooked partner, but as someone who had acted with intelligence, restraint, and patience. I felt no need to explain, no need to justify. My self-worth had never relied on her recognition. It had been built quietly, methodically, long before this moment. Seeing her stumble, watching the illusion of power crumble, was not about revenge for the sake of ego. It was about reclaiming the respect that had been denied to me for years. The audience should care because this isn't just a story of wealth or betrayal. It's about the value of patience, the subtle strength in silence, and the quiet power of being underestimated, and then proving, with calm precision, that you were never as invisible as everyone thought. I sat alone in the study that evening, the house finally quiet, the tension dissolved like mist. For years, I had measured my life in patience, in silent observation, in small deliberate choices. Tonight, the payoff wasn't just financial. It was clarity, dignity, and the knowledge that I had acted with intelligence rather than impulse. There was no gloating, no lingering bitterness, only a calm, steady satisfaction that came from knowing the truth had revealed itself in its own time. I thought of the years I had been overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated, and I realized that nothing I had done was wasted. Every quiet effort, every careful plan, every moment of restraint had led to this moment of quiet triumph. I had won, not by force, but by understanding the value of patience and foresight. The future felt open, unburdened. I would continue building my life with the same care and precision, but now with freedom from past injustices. Her departure, her shock, and her misplaced confidence were all behind me. As I closed the last file on the table, I whispered to myself, a faint smile touching my lips. Some victories are quiet, and that is what makes them unforgettable.